There's something satisfying about watching Scott Jennings try to defend the indefensible while the entire panel just unloads on him. And this CNN segment completely spiraled once Adam Kinzinger and Ana Navarro started exposing what critics say looks like a MAGA slush fund disguised as government policy. Welcome back, everybody. Hit that subscribe button, comment where you're watching from, and let me know your thoughts, because this argument turned into absolute chaos. Things got absolutely hammered during this explosive panel discussion after he once again tried to defend Donald Trump over what critics are calling one of the most corrupt, self-serving government schemes in modern American history. The debate centered around Trump's controversial $1.8 billion DOJ settlement fund and a newly revealed addendum that appears to shield not only Trump, but his family members, businesses, trusts, and affiliates from future IRS scrutiny tied to previous tax matters. What completely set the panel off was when former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger and Ana Navarro openly accused the Trump administration of running what amounts to a taxpayer-funded MAGA slush fund, while Jennings desperately tried to spin the entire thing as justified lawfare restitution. But the moment that really exposed the divide was when Kinzinger directly challenged Jennings to look January 6 police officers and their families in the eye and justify taxpayer money potentially going toward people connected to the Capitol attack. I've got a lot to say about this whole exchange, so stay tuned because we're about to dive into it together.
The DOJ's $1.8 billion slush fund deal with Donald Trump bans the IRS from pursuing claims it may have made against him forever. According to new terms released by the DOJ today, the federal government is, quote, forever barred and precluded from prosecuting or pursuing claims or examinations arising from any pending IRS matters. And the deal includes tax returns filed by Trump before the agreement was reached. The deal language applies not only to Trump, but his family members, trusts, companies, and other affiliates. It was signed by Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. That was Trump's former personal attorney, who is now the acting AG. Congressman, I'm going to start with you.
Thanks for starting with me. I appreciate it.
You are welcome. Because we had a little discussion about this yesterday, and I'll let Scott go first, so it is your turn. What do you make of this? This is an addendum, something new added to it, saying they cannot look back at anything that the Trumps have done, family members included, when it comes to how they dealt with their taxes.
You know, I was trying to think of a technical term for this. It's like criminal financial masturbation, right? So what you're looking at is this right here, okay? Right? This is the issue that I have. This is the biggest self-dealing in presidential history. You're talking about protecting his family and himself from any type of IRS investigation. Not only did he sue his own IRS for $10 billion, then he settled with himself for, by the way, it's $1.776 billion, 1776, which is simply a dog whistle to QAnon. That's all it is for his base. That's exactly what it is. And by the way, I'm an expert on it, so if people want to argue with me, I am ready to rock. The other issue that you have with this when you're talking about this type of self-dealing is that to say in perpetuity that you can't go after somebody for criminal, does that mean they're criming? And this is a guy who's already, he's been adjudicated on 34 felonies. This guy's been adjudicated for sexual abuse. We were talking about all this today. It seems like it's getting worse and worse and worse. And it's like he's burning the crops after he's stealing the corn because he's a lame duck president. Everything he's doing right now is about self-dealing, right? You're looking at the Trump boys. They're sitting there getting contracts on drone warfare. You see all that happening right now. You see, Kushner in the Middle East. All this is self-dealing. You see the stock trades. All this is him trying to enrich himself and his family as fast as he can. It's the most disgusting thing that I've seen, especially with somebody who's took the oath as a military member and as a congressman. And right now, when we're looking at this as sort of overarching, I can't imagine, right? I can't imagine anybody, and I'm not trying to stage this argument. I can't imagine anybody saying that this is right. It's so egregiously awful and corrupt. I don't know why right now there's not people, Republicans and Democrats, saying there's no way this type of self-dealing can happen. Right. It's so egregiously awful and corrupt. I don't know why right now there's not people, Republicans and Democrats, saying there's no way this type of self-dealing can happen.
I'm about to tell you that it's right. Go ahead, Scott.
Is it wrong or is it right?
Well, first of all, why did he sue the IRS?
Because it was a leak.
Because they leaked his tax returns illegally.
No, the IRS didn't leak. Let's be clear. The IRS didn't leak. An independent contractor did. So therefore, it doesn't apply.
It's a nice hair splitting, but
it's frivolous.
While Trump was president. This happened during Trump's administration.
Facts matter.
He himself was the victim of the federal government being weaponized against him for political purposes. That's number one. Number two, I believe this deal on the looking back, it doesn't apply forward looking. It has to do with this period of time.
Now,
number three, on the fund. We talked about this a little bit last night. I think that the idea that someone who attacked a police officer, they should not get money. That's not right. However, if someone does have a legitimate claim that they were over-prosecuted or targeted unfairly or was on the periphery of some issue and had no reason to be targeted, and they have a legitimate claim against the government, I have no problem with that. I think the government makes mistakes all the time, and people should be able to
well, if we were talking about legitimate claims,
go back against their government.
It would be transparent. It wouldn't be hidden, right, and secretive. That's the same thing that they do all the time. They hide behind this executive privilege on non-appropriated funds. When you have something secret, it's not about transparency. Everything we've talked about is transparency. And my question, Scott, is do you actually believe he should sue the IRS for $10 billion on an independent contractor leak?
Do I think that people should have their tax returns leaked by the federal government for political reasons, weaponized against them? It wasn't just him; it was other people too.
Well,
it was Ken Griffin also, and Ken Griffin just asked for an apology because he knows it's egregiously ridiculous.
Well, and Trump got an apology, and he's not getting any money out of it.
Okay, it was 2 years.
Well, it's $1.776 billion.
And 2 years after the statute of limitations on this, it was not the federal government who did this; it was an individual contractor. The Supreme Court has ruled
just
3 times.
On his own.
The Supreme Court has ruled 3 times in precedent since 1911 that you cannot be the judge of yourself on anything. And so Donald Trump is sued himself to get a fund, now settled with himself, to get a fund where he's going to write a check for himself. We all know that this is bullshit.
You agree with the leak?
This is a MAGA victimization fund that is sanctioned by Donald Trump. How dare he? How dare he? You look in the face and you justify this to the families of the police officers who were beaten, who were almost killed, to the people who were killed, to the people whose careers are ruined. I don't know about you, Scott, but I spent time with those officers and their families, and their lives have been ruined. American tax dollars should not go to this. This is dishonorable. It's grotesque. And anyone who tries to hide behind some kind of patriotism behind this should be ashamed of themselves. Look in the eyes of the families of the people who suffered on January 6th. You know who the victim is here? Them and our democracy. And shame on anyone who tries to justify this. And it's our dollars that they're robbing to do this. It's grotesque and despicable.
And it's also unconstitutional.
Absolutely. And I'm glad to see Jamie Raskin and the Democrats are going to challenge it.
Yeah, it is Congress who gets the power of the purse. They cannot adjudicate this amount of money like that. It's also,
I think there's a question on that.
I think it is no coincidence that they posted this addendum, that the DOJ posted this addendum after Todd Blanche had his hearing today in front of Congress, because he didn't want to answer questions on this, because it stinks to holy hell. And this is coming at a time when Americans can't afford gas, can't afford groceries, are canceling summer vacations. Farmers are going bankrupt. But we are settling with Donald Trump to the tunes of billions that we're saying you are above the law.
He's not getting any of the money.
I'm glad that everyone's suddenly alarmed about
all of us around this table, all of us around this table could be audited by the IRS. All of us.
Sure.
Stay on topic. Justify this. You're okay with this? You think this is an honorable use of taxpayer dollars? Yes or no?
I don't answer to you.
No, you can answer to the American people. Go ahead. I'm asking you a simple question. The millions of people watching right now, answer to them.
What is?
You think this is honorable?
I do not.
Crickets.
Can I speak? So the law.
You can't say yes or no.
Lydia, answer the question. Wow. What do you think? Is this the right thing to do?
I think it's important to acknowledge the lawfare that Trump and hundreds of people experienced.
Donald Trump can't.
But Donald Trump can't.
Right. Yeah, protecting himself in perpetuity is absolutely
ludicrous. And his family.
Well, it's not moving. It's not this point forward.
Yet.
Yeah, right, but it includes his family and all of the derivatives of his business. Lydia, go ahead.
No, I'm glad that everyone's up in arms about slush funds. I mean, Biden had $350 in a COVID fund that he appointed to DEI. $350 billion. There were about $20 billion that went to climate NGOs. I mean, I'm not a fan of slush funds.
Are you really?
I'm glad that you're outraged about $1 billion. I was also outraged about
Biden's not president.
$100 billion.
Biden's not president anymore. Justify this.
Let's the last administration. Staffers, people who were blacklisted. Trump spent tens of millions of. So the lawfare is a serious issue, and I think it makes sense that there would be some sort of restitution, given that this ruined people's lives. I am not sure that this is the best vehicle to make that happen.
Oh, for the love of God. Do we all agree that we are against the slush fund in Congress that pays out taxpayer money to people who make claims on sexual assault, sexual harassment, and claim, and we have no transparency. We don't know who it goes to, right?
That is horrific.
Okay, it is horrific.
But that's not
It is also equally horrific.
That is changed,
It is equally horrific that there will be no transparency to this alleged fund, that it is being done unconstitutionally because Congress has the power of the purse, that it is given Donald Trump a carte blanche to do whatever, and his family to do whatever the hell he wants, and that it is being negotiated by his personal lawyer with his personal lawyer, who is now the acting Attorney General. It is disgusting. It is.
What made this entire CNN panel so brutal for Scott Jennings is that the usual MAGA playbook completely collapsed the second the discussion became specific. Because when these debates stay vague, weaponization, lawfare, deep state, bias, conservative commentators like Jennings can usually survive by throwing around broad emotional talking points. But the second the panel started drilling into the actual details of this DOJ settlement, the entire defense started falling apart in real time. And that's because the details here are absolutely staggering. We are talking about a deal tied to Donald Trump that reportedly bars future IRS scrutiny over certain previous tax matters involving not just Trump himself, but his family members, businesses, trusts, and affiliates. At the exact same time, the administration is connected to a proposed $1.8 billion compensation structure surrounding January 6th related grievances that critics say lacks proper transparency and oversight. And to make matters even more unbelievable, the entire thing is being overseen by people with direct personal loyalty ties to Trump, including his former personal attorney now serving inside the Justice Department. That's the kind of situation that under any previous administration, Republican or Democrat, would trigger nonstop outrage across the political spectrum. And that's why the reactions from Adam Kinzinger, Anna Navarro, and others on that panel resonated so strongly. Because they weren't just arguing about policy disagreements anymore. They were arguing about whether the federal government itself is being transformed into a protection mechanism for one political figure and his inner circle. That's a completely different level of concern.
And honestly, one of the strongest moments came when Kinzinger described the entire thing as criminal financial masturbation. Crude wording aside, the point he was making was crystal clear. Trump appears to be operating inside a system where the lines between public power and personal benefit are becoming increasingly blurred. That's why Kinzinger kept emphasizing the word self-dealing. Because once government authority starts being used in ways that personally benefit the president financially, legally, or politically, you are entering territory that becomes extraordinarily dangerous for democratic institutions. And what's so remarkable is how weak the MAGA defense of this actually sounds once you strip away the outrage and talking points. Notice how Jennings constantly retreated into technicalities instead of addressing the broader ethical issue. It was an independent contractor. It doesn't apply forward-looking. There were leaks. People were targeted unfairly. None of that actually addresses the central concern being raised by the panel. Should a president effectively have the ability to create legal and financial protection systems surrounding himself and his political allies using the power of the federal government? That's the actual issue. And the reason Jennings kept struggling is because deep down, even many conservatives know this looks terrible. Because imagine for 1 second if this exact same story involved Barack Obama or Joe Biden. Imagine if Obama's former personal lawyer became acting attorney general and then signed an agreement shielding Obama's businesses and family members from future IRS scrutiny tied to previous tax matters. Imagine if Biden proposed a multi-billion-dollar compensation mechanism tied to his political supporters while his administration controlled oversight of the process. Conservative media would not just criticize it, they would call it the greatest corruption scandal in modern American history. And everybody knows that.
That's why the constant "what about Biden" pivot from Jennings and other MAGA defenders falls apart so quickly. Because whataboutism is not a defense. It's an escape route. It's what people use when they cannot justify the actual behavior being discussed. And that's become one of the defining features of Trump-era political discourse. Every scandal immediately becomes, what about Hunter Biden? What about Obama? What about Hillary? What about COVID funds? What about Democrats? The goal is never to defend the conduct itself. The goal is to create enough partisan fog that accountability becomes impossible. But this panel exposed why that strategy is becoming less effective, even on mainstream television, because people are starting to notice how abnormal all of this actually is. The scale of the self-interest involved here is becoming impossible to ignore. And Anna Navarro absolutely nailed one of the biggest hypocrisies in the entire debate when she pointed out how MAGA world suddenly pretends to care about lawfare victims while ignoring the complete lack of transparency involved in this proposed fund structure.
That point matters enormously because conservatives spent years attacking secretive government spending, executive overreach, and politically controlled financial systems, yet now many of those same voices are defending a structure critics argue could allow Trump and his allies extraordinary discretion over taxpayer money tied to January 6 related claims. And that's where this becomes bigger than just Trump himself. This is about what happens when political tribalism completely overrides principle, because many of the people defending this today would absolutely oppose it if the political parties were reversed. They know they would oppose it. Everyone watching knows they would oppose it. But loyalty to Trump has become so central to modern MAGA politics that consistency no longer matters.
That's why Scott Jennings' role on these panels has become so revealing. He isn't there to objectively evaluate the ethics of the situation. He's there to provide narrative cover for Trump, no matter what the controversy is. That's why he constantly narrows every discussion into hyper-specific technical arguments instead of confronting the larger reality in front of him. And even then, the defense keeps collapsing because the facts themselves are politically toxic. Think about the optics of this for ordinary Americans struggling financially right now. People are dealing with housing costs, healthcare costs, food inflation, student debt, job insecurity. And meanwhile, Washington is debating billion-dollar compensation systems, IRS protections, and legal carve-outs connected to one of the most controversial presidents in American history. That disconnect is exactly why so many people outside hardcore partisan circles look at this and immediately feel something is deeply wrong. And the January 6th aspect makes it even worse politically, because the more MAGA figures try to portray January 6th defendants as victims deserving restitution, the more they reopen public discussion about what actually happened that day. And that's not a conversation Republicans consistently win outside their base. Kinzinger understood that perfectly when he brought up the police officers and families affected by January 6th. Because no matter how much revisionism exists now, millions of Americans still remember watching the Capitol attack unfold live. They remember the violence. They remember officers being assaulted. They remember lawmakers running for safety. They remember Trump supporters attempting to stop the certification of a Democratic election. And now critics are being told taxpayers may help finance compensation connected to that entire episode, while Trump himself receives broad legal and financial protection through government power structures.
That's why emotions on that panel became so intense, because beneath all the shouting, this debate is really about whether the United States is moving toward a system where political loyalty determines accountability. That's the underlying fear driving so much outrage right now. And honestly, the scariest part may not even be the policy details themselves. It's how normalized all of this has become inside parts of the Republican Party. 10 years ago, many conservatives would have exploded over even the appearance of this kind of self-dealing. Today, large portions of MAGA media instinctively defend it before the details are even fully understood. That shift tells you everything. The Republican Party used to define itself around limiting government power, protecting institutions, and preventing corruption. Under Trump, many of these values became secondary to protecting one individual politically at all costs. And that's why this conversation felt so explosive. Not because people were simply arguing over policy, but because the panel was exposing a much deeper reality. Modern MAGA politics increasingly treats criticism of Trump himself as illegitimate by definition, no matter how serious the issue becomes. That's why Jennings and others always end up cornered into defending things they would never tolerate from anyone else. Once political identity becomes centered around one man instead of consistent principles, every controversy becomes a loyalty test. And that's exactly what this panel exposed for millions of viewers watching at home.